Julian, and good morning to everybody who's here joining us today. And I have to say, great talk from Nigel, lots and lots of really interesting tips for me as I've got a big multi-Europe trip coming along. And I really love the fact that you've created such a diverse program today, which really, ties into, I guess, what I'm talking about. But congratulations for putting on such a great event and nicely attended as well. So just for those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder of Maiden Voyage, and I established my company back in 2008. I was heading up technology for companies like BBC, ITV, EasyJet. And as a woman traveling around the world by myself quite a lot, I found it a little bit boring, a little bit isolating. And I was one of those women that quite often had dinner in my hotel room, having room service, because I had no one to go out with, and I didn't really feel that it was as accessible to me in those days because of unwanted attention and so on and so forth. And so really, Maiden Voyage started life as an indulgence for me to get a friend in every city and create this social network through which we could all connect and meet up and have dinner together. So a number of years on now, for those of you who do know us, you'll know that we're recognised as one of the world's specialists in diverse traveller safety. So we've evolved very much from our feminist roots to encompass lots and lots of different aspects of diversity. And I guess our key solutions really are coming on site or, these days over Zoom, delivering travel safety workshops and also e-learning solutions as well. We've also got a global community, so we still have a tribe of female business travellers. We have an active Facebook group. We sometimes run travel chats, which are predominantly focused on challenges facing females, and we can still ask those awkward questions, like what's the one thing you're looking forward to doing travelling after you've been working in your slippers for the last 12 months. So we have still got that community, but also what we provide is some travel safety tips on our website. So feel free to head on over later on today and have a look around and see what goodies we've got in there for you. But before we get started, I just want to run a quick poll. I want to find out where you are on your diversity journey within your organisation. So let me just release that first one there. What I want to know is, in your current travel policies and processes, do you provide any specific advice or resources for the different diverse traveller groups that I'm going to be speaking about today? So that poll is now running. I've got my ideas of what you're going to be telling me, but I don't know for sure. So feel free just to get clicking there. There we go. Can see that happening now.
Perfect. And just to interject, if you can't see the poll at the bottom of the screen, there is a button that says polls. If you click on that, it may open it up. But I can see a number of people are already voting.
Okay, so I'm going to end the poll there. And I'm going to just share those results. It is as I expected. I think everybody or quite a lot of people these days are on message with female travellers and of course disabled travellers. But actually the two areas where we're seeing less traction at the moment is for LGBT travellers and those with different ethnic backgrounds. But I'm going to just jump into to some of these in more detail now. So I'm just going to close that poll. There we go. Has that poll gone on your screens? Julian, has the poll disappeared now?
Yes, it has for me. Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I strongly believe that inclusive duty of care is not a one size fits all. And I guess I would be so bold to say that actually inclusive duty of care these days is the nuts and bolts of travel safety or duty of care with personalisation on top. And it's only over the last few years that we've started to talk about personalisation in travel. And now you've got me harping on about personalisation in duty of care. But hopefully by the end of today, and it seems like we've already got a really mature audience in terms of catering for some of your diverse groups, that it's not going to be a long stretch for you to get to what I would say is pretty much gold star on inclusive travel safety. So today I'm going to be talking specifically about these 4 groups. So we're going to be talking about female, LGBT, ethnicity, and seen and unseen disabilities. And you can see that I've purposely avoided the word BAME or BIPOC. And that's for a number of reasons. But what we're seeing is in our working groups and within, indeed in our client bases, that the BAME community, as defined, are actually pushing back against being pigeonholed or boxed, because again, that is being seen as other, you know, and we're all unique. And actually, one of the things that we should consider is in intersectionality. So yes, I am female, I'm British, but actually if I go to a different part of the world, then suddenly, you know, I will be called out because I'm white. If I'm in a place that is predominantly black, I maybe have an unseen disability. So there's lots of things that make up our personal characteristics. But for the purpose of the exercise today, we're going to look at those 4 areas. But actually, I do want you to consider that you may be sending a woman who has a certain ethnic background to a certain country, but her predominant fear may be still around sexual harassment because she's female. So on that note, I'm going to start with the female travellers. And when I started life with Maiden Voyage, a lot of people said to me, oh, this is really patronising, this is really sexist, you know, why are you calling out females? Do you think that females are less able? But actually, you know, a lot of us are in Britain today, we're in a very equal society, but the world at large isn't equal. And so in our research, and in fact, some of you will have seen the research which came out from GBTA a couple of years ago, we can still see that there are some challenges facing female travellers. And of course, it would not have escaped your radar, the tragic death of Sarah Everard. Although she wasn't on a business trip, you know, she was still, again, a victim of violence against a woman. So the concerns or the real life challenges that we do face as female travellers is that sexual harassment, sexual assault, but also it's a bit of a minefield in terms of dress code. So for example, if Julian and I popped over to Saudi this afternoon for a meeting, you know, Julian can continue to dress as he is. I'm going to have to dress more modestly. I certainly wouldn't be dressed like this. And so there are different things, there are different codes, both, you know, more subtle, but also more legal, I guess, as well. It was only until a few years ago that women weren't allowed to drive, for example, in some parts of the Middle East, and there are still certain legal restrictions which pertain to women and not to men. But of course, we've got those cultural attitudes to women as well. And things like the non-verbal cues and greetings. So again, if I was in some parts of the Middle East, you know, me forthright, in a non-COVID world, you know, shaking hands with somebody and, you know, being very sort of focused with my eye contact and all of that, or maybe hugging, you know, not really appropriate. And I spent 6 years living in the Netherlands, actually, and our greetings there were 3 kisses. And quite often with people who you're not that familiar with, you know, in some parts of the world, if I was to sort of turn up and do the 3 kisses, that might, again, not be appropriate, but it also might give the wrong signal. Another thing that we've seen is bag theft. And of course, this does impact both male and females. But predominantly, one of the things that, that we do see is handbag theft. And particularly in hotels where a lady might leave a handbag at the breakfast table to secure her place while she pops to the buffet. So again, quite often we keep everything in there. I've heard stories of people who've not only lost their flight tickets and their, you know, the money and the passports and everything else, but actually one lady was carrying a whole set of travel documents for a whole team, and the entire trip, you know, got ruined because of that. We've got stalking, either in person or online, and then of course pregnancy. Now, even if you think that the rest of it is all very sort of cliche or sexist, you know, we still do get pregnant sometimes, and that in itself has got some issues, as Nigel just alluded to. But also, if you think, for example, you maybe decided to run a sales incentive trip to Latin America, great idea. Everybody's excited to travel, but actually we've got the Zika virus there. So if you have got somebody who's pregnant, then they might want to give that destination a swerve. But likewise, some vaccinations would be off limits. And also airline fit to fly policies aren't always that easy to understand or to comply with. So thinking about ethnicity, some of the work that we've been doing has been on the back of the tragic death of George Floyd. And what we're seeing is a lot of our clients now are wanting to do something specifically around ethnicity. And so I'm just going to dip into some of the research and some of the work that we've done. And one of the things that we did as an organisation is that we put together a working group of business travellers, both male and female, from very different ethnic groups, so that they could share with us their real life experiences. So here I'm just going to share some of these with you. So for example, we had a lady who was commonly stopped and selected for her bag to be put in the hold, whilst her non-Black colleagues were not selected out for that. We've seen excessive screening and questioning at airports by security staff, and also questions around, you know, how long have you been resident in this country? Why are you traveling to this country? Overly intrusive. Again, the travel documents were put under extra scrutiny, maybe sent to the next level of check-in at the airport. And then microaggressions. So, for example, a lady shopping in duty-free was basically given the impression that the sales agent didn't think that she could be affording such luxuries because she wasn't, you know, of a white ethnicity. And what we've also seen is a real rise in Asian hate crimes. And we've been doing some work with one of our clients actually in Silicon Valley with the sort of Chinese Asian communities who've really suffered a lot of racism on the back of COVID. So some really quite horrendous incidents. So again, if you do have travellers who belong to those populations, it's important to understand where they're travelling to and what types of response they might get. So some other examples, we had one gentleman who was sitting in upper class on his flight, and all the staff thought that they knew him. They kept, you know, being overly familiar with them. And at a certain point, he said, "I don't think I know you. Why are you being so familiar with me?" And they thought that he was crew, basically deadheading, because otherwise, how could he have afforded to be sitting in the upper class of the aircraft? We had another lady actually who was wearing a hijab, and again, she was in business class, and the crew asked her a number of times if she was sitting in the right seat. Now, that made the other passengers feel really nervous that she could in fact be a terrorist because she was attracting so much attention from the crew. We've also seen ladies of, you know, maybe darker skins being accused of being prostitutes in various parts of the world, and also that whether this is perception or reality, some of our ethnic minority focus group told us that they felt that if they presented to a medical facility, they wouldn't be given the same priority because there is a perception that they wouldn't be able to afford the medical treatment. So these are just some of the things that they've told us that they've experienced as they've been traveling. Now, as Julian mentioned, you know, your sexual orientation may well put you at an extreme risk. So there's a couple of organisations that I really recommend that you take a look at. There's ILGA, the International Lesbian and Gay Association, and there's also another organisation called Ecodex. And what these organisations do is they create a heat map, and they keep the latest up-to-date information on different parts of the world and their status with in relation to homosexuality and transgender and many other variations of sexual orientation. And in these documents, what you will find is the state response to homosexuality. So is it by Sharia law or different laws whereby the punishment may be, you know, quite extreme? And so, for example, over 70 nations still criminalize consensual sexual acts between persons of the same sex, irrespective of, you know, where they are, you know, in a relationship, or, you know, where they do this. And so to take this even one step further, there are some countries that still carry the death penalty, you know, so quite extreme destinations maybe, where you wouldn't necessarily be sending some of your travelers, but we still see that Saudi Arabia is on there as well, and some parts of northern Nigeria. And I do know that some of our clients do send their travelers to these areas. This may well be sparking questions for you, and you're probably thinking, you know, can people refuse, or can we force people to go to some of those destinations? So feel free to pop them into the chat box below, and I can give you some advice on that. Other things to think about would be entrapment. You know, it's a very liberal age. A lot of people now are using dating apps, for example. And what we have seen in some countries is, you know, people who are homophobic, or even the local authorities, maybe creating fake profiles on dating apps so that they can arrange to meet somebody and either imprison them or indeed to assault them. So other things that may put you at risk, even if you don't identify with the LGBTQ community, is maybe incriminating photographs, or it may be a simple thing like you have been to Gay Pride, you enjoyed it, you've got a photograph on your social media. Again, that may out you potentially as somebody who belongs to the community, or as somebody who is promoting the community. And again, that may well put you at risk. In some countries, irrespective of gender, a public display of affection would, you know, get you into deep water. But even a simple thing like having same-sex occupants of a hotel room. Now, I haven't come across any organisations for a long time who are suggesting that employees share a hotel room. I think, you know, it happened a lot more years ago, but actually being forced to share a hotel room with somebody who is the same sex could, again, make things rather difficult. If you do have somebody who's traveling with their same-sex partner, and they're again staying in a country where you know, homosexuality is illegal, if there are twin beds and they appear to have been pushed together, or, you know, only one bed appears to have been slept in, we have had many instances of hotel staff reporting that on. But also even our dress and other identifying signs. We had a lady who was actually traveling to Texas. Now, Texas does appear green on the ILGA and the Ecodex maps, but actually she arrived in a Pride t-shirt, and it was suggested that she possibly remove that and put something else on, because again, she was, you know, mingling amongst a quite a homophobic group of people. But also we've seen examples of people from the Netherlands. I know we've got some religious institutions on here today, working in a deeply religious part of Africa, I think a Christian area, whereby they were told by the locals that by even interacting with somebody from a liberal country made them feel that they were now in danger. So again, it is not just about protecting ourselves, but it's also about protecting our colleagues. And the other thing that we may do inadvertently is accidentally out somebody. So, for example, if we've got somebody who's openly gay within our organisation, you know, they talk about their partner, they may even have adopted children. That's absolutely, you know, acceptable in our society. But again, in some countries, referring to somebody's same-sex partner, again, could out them. So moving on to transgender, there are 13 countries who specifically criminalise transgender, and these are typically people are identified because they appear to be cross-dressing. And so I've just listed those countries there. And again, they have got some very severe penal codes in some countries because of transgender expression. So other things that the transgender community have experienced and do experience would be those invasive airport pat-downs. And some of you will remember, I think, a transgender lady who was travelling from Luton Airport to Dublin. She was patted down by a man who, you know, belonged to the airport screening team. So what we do know is that, you know, you can, if you do belong to the transgender community, insist that somebody pats you down if they need to do that, you know, of the same gender that you are expressing. It may be also that somebody is wearing, for example, prosthetics. So airport scanners may actually flag up a gender anomaly. So again, something to be considerate of. And also that overt outing and that public humiliation, you know, hey, we've got a tranny over here, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous, some of the things that our transgender community have had to experience, but they may well be carrying or wearing medical equipment or prosthetics. So again, you're probably going to have questions about how you handle this, so feel free to pop them in there as well. It could be that somebody's going through a transit port where there is intolerance. So it could be, for example, somebody flying from the UK to Australia, maybe doing a stopover in Doha, somewhere like that. So again, just something to be mindful of. And then, yeah, verbal, physical abuse, and just, you know, some common dumb mistakes that can be quite offensive. So, for example, we had a transgender lady, beautifully dressed, long hair, makeup, nice clothes, checked into a hotel in New York, and the man behind reception desk didn't have the courtesy to look up and just welcomed her as sir. So again, you know, not ideal. Now, I know that many of you, 75% of you, said that you do specifically also cater in your travel programs for disabled travellers. And actually, COVID is making us be a little bit more high touch. And so some of the things that maybe do slip through the net will maybe come to the fore now as well, as we start to be more hands-on. So thinking about here, you know, passenger assistance programs, they're great when they work, but actually when travel disruption occurs, then that's when things start to fall down. So it may be a flight's delayed or it's diverted, and then suddenly that airport assistance, that wheelchair assistance, doesn't arrive at the other end. Also, what we might see, of course, is prolonged customs checks due to somebody who's got equipment or medication. And actually, on the point of medication, I probably should have mentioned that for the transgender community as well, who may well be traveling with hormones. So it may be that your disabled travellers need more time to get through the airport. But also, if you have got somebody who is incapacitated, and haven't we all been incapacitated at some point? It could be that you've been on crutches, or, you know, you've had an illness or an injury, which has, you know, made you really you know, considerate of the disabled community because you've had that temporary challenge yourself. But it may be that someone's got specific dietary needs, but they can't get out in the evening, or they're not comfortable going out in the evening, but the hotel where they're staying doesn't actually have that particular food. So also thinking about people who are traveling and how they're going to dine, and, you know, what their options might be in advance. Then, of course, we've got conferences. We've had examples of people who are going to a conference, but they can't actually get to the conference room because it's down a stairwell and there is no lift access. So again, making sure that there is that access for our disabled travellers. But also in some countries where alcohol is illegal, you may have somebody who's got a disability, which means that they walk with a gait, or they can't walk, you know, quite symmetrical. So they could be confused with being drunk. They could be arrested, you know, or it might be that they're traveling to an area, some parts of the world where disabled people are actually kept sort of locked away, that they're not actively out in society. So some parts of Latin America absolutely do that. So it could be that they just attract attention, a lot of people curious about them. Or it could be, you know, that those countries, because they don't cater or, you know, make their cities accessible, that there are little or no disability provisions for your business travellers. And it may be that your travellers need to have a travel companion go with them. So that could either be a human travel companion, or of course it could be a guide dog or another service animal. So how can you, as a travel manager, a HR manager, a health and safety manager, a security manager, be more diversity informed? Well, I think it's, you know, really important that you don't let fear stop you from doing this, that you start to really engage the best way that you can to ask the questions. You know, hopefully somebody will tell you if that's an offensive question. So a way that you might want to do that is, if you've got internal diversity networks, like a female network or an LGBT network or a disability network, that you go along to some of their meetings and that you hear what they've got to say, and also tell them that travel wants to partner with them to understand and better cater for those communities. Now, of course, there's massive issues around privacy. You can't ask somebody if they belong to the LGBTQ community, or if they're pregnant, you know, or if they've got an unseen disability. And therefore, it's important that you provide access to resources, or you signpost your travellers to the resources to help them make those informed decisions about their travel needs. So it may be, for example, you've got links to the ILGA or the Equaldex resources on your intranet. And I think it's also important to empower that employee choice. And what I mean by this is that I've seen countless times where managers have made a decision about an employee not being able to go somewhere because of their personal characteristics. And probably my most shocking one was for a senior leader at a huge Canary Wharf bank, who said he would not allow his female employees to go to Saudi Arabia because it wasn't safe for them. You know, that is very career limiting, and it's our jobs to make sure that people can go wherever they want to go, where their jobs need them to go, but to make them do that, or help them do that safely and comfortably. So really avoiding those misplaced intentions, because you could, you know, find yourself getting your head bitten off, but also you could find yourself in a legal case as well. It's also really important to take action on feedback. So we've had examples of LGBT travellers being abused by hoteliers. We want to take those offending suppliers off our travel programs. So make sure that you do get feedback loops from all your travellers, irrespective of their characteristics. And be aware of the context of your travellers whilst they are travelling, and just make sure that they've got everything that they need. And as I mentioned, just avoiding that accidental outing of somebody. The best way to do that, of course, is to educate yourselves, which I've just talked about, and educate your business travellers. And that doesn't matter how you do that. It's got to be workable for your company, for your culture, and it's got to be relatable. So there's no point, you know, having a white middle-aged man talking to females about how it might feel to be sexually harassed. So making sure that we are, you know, talking specifically you know, from an informed standpoint, with research that's backed up, which absolutely relates to the traveller community that you're talking to. And I strongly suggest in all the talks that I give that you just ask 2 questions. And even if we're not talking about diversity, in this day and age, if we're talking about COVID, are you comfortable taking this trip? And is there anything you need from me or us to make you more comfortable in taking the trip? And the reason for this question is not just around the issues that we've talked about on diversity. It could be a health issue. Somebody could be traveling with a colleague who makes them feel intensely uncomfortable. There may be low-level sexual harassment happening in the office, and somebody's nervous about traveling with that particular person. They may be in the early stages of pregnancy. They will disclose to you, you know, what they feel comfortable in disclosing. But if you don't ask that question, you won't know. And, you know, you don't know the sort of stress or the concerns or worries that are going through your travellers' minds when they're on those trips. And what we saw from the GBTA research was that actually 80% of women changed their behaviour when they were away on travel because of their concerns about their personal safety. So this is a real thing. So in terms of booking responsibly, a lot of these are pertinent, of course, to your disabled travellers, but accept that a disabled traveller will cost more per head, possibly because you've got, you know, extra resources needed, more time. They may well, for example, want to take an afternoon flight, which could be more expensive because it's just not really helpful for them because of a condition to get up at, say, 4 o'clock in the morning. So make sure that you've got that smart sourcing of suppliers, that you really look at what they're providing. Again, it could be that hotels have got a brilliant long guest policy. It could be that they have got, you know, they advertise that they're LGBT friendly. And also, I guess, in your RFPs, looking to see if they've got a diverse team themselves, that they are also committed to diversity and inclusion. And then, as we talked about, you know, traveller assistance is great when it works, but making sure that everything that you can do, you do to make sure that it's a seamless end-to-end journey. And of course, physical inspections of hotels. So, you know, I've seen many hotel RFPs. I sit on the GBTA risk committee where we actually developed probably about 300 questions to ask hotels, but it's not just a tick box exercise. You want to know for sure what actually the resources are that they've got available. So I'm going to come on to some examples in a tick, but if you can't actually physically get there yourselves, then the next best thing is to get that traveller feedback. So, you know, thinking again about ground transportation, you might need accessible vehicles. Making sure that the drivers speak the language of the passenger is always really comforting. You may have a deaf passenger or a deaf traveller who's travelling to a hotel. They might need a flashing fire alarm in their room because they're not going to hear an audible one, but also that the provider can maybe write down in the local language, in the traveller's language, any information that they need. And then also, as I suggested, suppliers who are really not committed to looking after your travellers in the way that you would at the office, I would, you know, highly recommend that we remove them from your travel programme. So, and that's a bit of a whistle stop. I'm just going to release another poll now. Remember, again, you can throw some questions in the chat box, but my next poll is, I want to know what you might do, or if you might do something differently as a result of what I've shared with you today. And if there is sort of a light bulb moment or something that really resonated with you, you know, maybe throw that in the chat box as well. And, you know, good for you to have a conversation, hopefully inspire each other to just make one or two minor steps, even if it's only one thing. Okay, wonderful. So we've got 92% of you there who have had a valuable takeaway. 93. Brilliant. There you go. I'll share that. Oh, I'll just ignore that for a moment. Okay, I'm just going to share those results. Bear with me 1 second. Somebody just knocked at my door.
Okay, so as Carolyn said, we've had one question come through from Matilda. If you can think of anything, please feel free to send it through. I think the presentation Carolyn's provided has been extremely insightful, and for me, it's outlined a lot of very practical considerations and steps that we can take with respect to travel programs. So keep the questions coming. I can see Carolyn's back.
I'm back.
So the challenges of home working, eh? So
yes, indeed. I've never had an Amazon parcel in the middle of a presentation before.
No, it's the first time for everything. And
so there are my contact details. I'm going to take the presentation down now, and I'll stop screen sharing, and I can just bob back to answer any questions that you might have.
Perfect. And again, as I've said with the other presentations, we will be sharing more details on Maiden Voyage and how you can actively engage with Carolyn in the future. First question that I can see has come in from Matilda. She's asked, do you have any advice for navigating business spaces where sexism is less legally enforced but more socially expected? A good example she's given is the reluctance to talk to female CEOs.
Yeah, I have. I thought she was going to be referring to bottom nipping in Italy or somewhere. Yeah, interesting. We had a really good example where we had a lady in the Middle East who traveled to the Middle East, and she had a meeting in what I think it was Riyadh or somewhere like that. And that went quite well, and she then went to a satellite office in, I guess, in a more conservative part of the country, and when she got there, they wouldn't or couldn't have a meeting with her in the same room, and therefore she had to go to another room in the same building. She traveled for 4 hours, and she had to do a Zoom meeting with them because they couldn't sit in the same room as her. So I think what you can do as an organization is really set that woman up for success. in terms of edifying before she goes into that meeting, that she is the key decision maker, you know, that she is empowered, she's informed, she's the best person for the job, and really set that up so that the people who are meeting her absolutely understand that, you know, don't talk to the person next to her who's, you know, maybe more junior. So that's something that we could recommend. But also we have got, and I'm not sure if the lady Matilda's talking about Japan or the Middle East, but if it's the Middle East, what we've got is a fantastic chat that we did a few weeks ago with a number of women who travel to that region, and also who were based in that region, again across a number of ethnicities, and I'm more than happy to share our Middle East chat if that is indeed the region, because it's very uplifting and empowering.
Perfect, and thank you. We've had two really positive comments come in, from one from Kathy and one from Meon. I do have a question for you whilst we're waiting to see if any more come in, but I think it's the point you talked about where if you're handling a subject, it's obviously best to do so coming from sort of a position of knowledge or experience. Yeah. I suppose I am that middle-aged white man that you talked about, and I think it's you know, for me, if I had to talk to one of my female colleagues about sort of the support that they may need, it's a difficult thing to do. So you know, I'd feel that they might find it patronizing, for example. So if I'm trying to say what support do you need, is there any advice you can give to people that are perhaps a bit nervous of talking about these things?
So when you've got that situation where it's got to be a white middle-aged man asking a woman if she needs anything, you mean?
Yeah, or just any examples. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually,
some of these things are very difficult to discuss.
Yeah. So we actually built our training because of this. So I actually spoke at the Duty of Care conference in London probably about 5-6 years ago, and after I shared the stats of our women in business travel research, had a queue of guys from Canary Wharf come up to talk to me, and they were the heads of security for the big banks, and they were saying, you know, I'm ex-army, I'm ex-military, and you know, I suggested that a woman wear a fake wedding ring when she goes to Dubai or wherever, and she bit my head off. And she said, I travel there all the time. Who are you to tell me how to behave? And so they were a bit bull in a china shop, you know, in terms of the way that they approached it. So if it has to be that dynamic, and you can't point to us or our resources, or we can't help you with that, or, you know, we can't, you know, do some training or something like that, then I would open it up and not specifically say, look, I realize that you're a woman. You might have some concerns as a woman going to this region, but actually in general, and actually COVID just makes it so much easier, because, you know, we will then interpret that question in any way that we want to, where we may feel vulnerable. But it's also about having that relationship. If somebody just, you know, stalked up to me and asked me that question, and I didn't have a relationship or feel comfortable with them, or feel that they were coming from a good place, then I'll probably be more closed and more guarded. You know, so it could be an open question like, you know, how do you feel about traveling to, you know, Dubai? Have you been there before? And, you know, do you like it? You know, have you got any concerns? You know, and just be genuine, really.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good advice. And obviously, as I've said, we're going to be sharing more detail on the sort of the services that Maiden Voyage provides. I know that you've got a really useful module at the moment about COVID safety as well. So again, we'll be sharing all of this detail. I think I haven't seen any more questions come through, but Matilda has confirmed that it was East Asia she was talking around, and obviously I think there may be an opportunity to make an introduction there. So yeah,
I'll share the travel chat video. She'll love it.
Okay, good stuff. No, as I say, really, really insightful this morning, extremely useful. Something we all need to be considering. So thank you so much for your time this morning, Carolyn.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.